welcome to the 5th episode in our Methods of Divination subseries. Today we're going to be talking to you about spirit animals.
We're doing this Methods of Divination subseries so that we can be transparent about how we get guidance and also refer back to these episodes from future stories where different things apply, so we don't have to reintroduce the concept of how we get guidance. We can just point people back to these episodes. And so to do a dedicated episode on spirit animals is a little redundant because we've told some great stories in episode 1, some great stories in episode 2 with Bentley's story. And so I would also from here refer you back to those episodes to get even some more mind-blowing spirit animal stories. But with that said, we have some more lined up for this episode, and we also just want to talk a little bit about spirit animals. And so one of the most important things that we want to start off mentioning is that spirit animals don't just show up in the physical world, they also show up in dreams. And so Sophia had a pretty powerful dream that was teaching us why the dream animals are showing up.
In my dream, my teacher showed up, and she is also the dean of the school. So teachers in our dreams tell Brandon and I that we really need to wake up and heed the message that's being delivered to us. In the dream, she said that Spirit was sending me all these dream animals so that I could really take the opportunity to transform the energies that animal represents. And each animal carries a different energy, so I can really take that message in and see what strengths and weaknesses I'm experiencing and can pull from that animal into my life to make these changes within.
And this brings me to the next thing I want to say, that I think there's a big misconception that we each only have one spirit animal. I remember that was a misconception I had myself, and when I first was introduced to this concept of spirit animals many, many years ago, I was concerned with what is my spirit animal, as if I only had one. And I did come across a source that said it changed throughout your lifetime. And so then I was under the impression that I would have one for a period of time, like at least a few months, maybe a year or two, and then it would switch. But what I've realized recently is that it can switch minute to minute. Some of these nights, Sophia's getting like 3 different animals that we need to look into in the morning. And then the next night, between her and I, we'll have 3 different other ones to look through the next day. Now let's talk about how we extract what the meaning or the message is from each animal. In episode number 5 on angel numbers, I had mentioned that I found a source that really resonated with me, and I made a deal with my guides that if they wanted me to understand the message of the number that they were showing me, to align it with the messages in that particular source, which in that case was Joanne's Sacred Scribes. Now with spirit animals, I have not found that source for myself. We have a little book, but it's never really quite resonated with me as a whole. And then with each animal, the messages underneath it, they just jump wildly from paragraph to paragraph. And what I have to do with that book is exactly what I do with that book and beyond that book. So messages on the internet or books that my friends have that I'll reach out and ask them if I really need to know. And so I will just use what message resonates with me. And it's kind of like an inner knowing I have, and it's something that just stands out, and I'm just like, oh yeah, obviously, that's it. That's what's been going on in my life.
And I'll just say that part of the message will resonate. Oftentimes, like the entire message may not resonate, and maybe it does in some cases, but pick out those bits and pieces that you feel, oh, okay, I get it. That's what I'm feeling or going through in my life.
So that's what we do as far as when we get the messages from the book or books or the internet, but it's not always that cut and dry. Spirit animals can also be quite literal sometimes or mean something else entirely. that's more personal to the person receiving it. And we'll illustrate this concept through some of our stories as we move forward in this episode. The last thing I want to talk about in this introduction here is animals that are regional or familiar to you as the receiver. I got to be honest that I've never really gotten animals that I don't know. I've never been shown an animal in my dream where I've had to look it up based on what it looked like and find out that it's an animal that only exists on other continents or anything like that. We do get animals in dreams that aren't regional to where we live in the Rocky Mountains, but they are always animals that are familiar to us. And I want to say when they come in dreams, it's 100% a message from spirit, and we know to look it up. The ones that you see in the physical world, that's not as cut and dry. I'm not going throughout my day and like making a list of every single animal I saw and looking up all, up to 100 animals, whatever it may be, as I'm going throughout my day. In the physical world, we look for the synchronistic ones, like the ones that are synchronistic in the way of them showing up repeatedly, or even just my attention being snapped over to it and connecting eye contact, which has happened a few times.
Or animals that show up in a startling way. Let's say you're driving and, 5 deer jump out right in front of you and you brake just in time. Well, then you might want to think about, was that a message from spirit?
Right. So with that said, let's move into some stories. The first story we're going to tell is about the moose. Oh, the moose.
Boy.
If you've heard our second episode on Bentley's story, you'll know what the moose means to us in our lives. And it means
that you have the strength to endure this emotionally turbulent period.
So now when a moose shows up for us, we're like, uh-oh. Pretty much every time. But we're saving our favorite story for last on the coyote, so make sure you stick around for that story. But yeah, let's tell you another moose story.
So I left for work one morning, and Brandon wasn't feeling well the night before into the morning, so much so that he couldn't get up with me and help me get ready for work, which is something that he normally does. And so I get in my car and I start driving to work, which is a 20-minute drive. And about 5 minutes into the drive, I see this huge moose, and it starts running with my car, and it ran for quite a ways with me. And I was like, oh no, I wonder what today is going to hold or what emotions are going to come about. So
I'm sitting at home and I'm dealing with a kidney infection, and it's kind of a longer story. I got given the guidance about this and what to do about it in a dream in a symbolic way. And it wasn't until the middle of this day that I looked back and went, oh, that's what that dream meant. And that's what I should have done. And could have avoided this to some degree.
Yeah, so I show up at work, was working at the local hospital. I worked in the lab. And so about 10 o'clock rolls around, and I keep getting texts from Brandon saying about how horrible he's feeling. It keeps getting worse. And I reminded him, okay, well, if you need to come into the hospital, we're here, we have health insurance. And if you want to come get checked out, do it. And he's not one to go to the emergency room or any doctor very easily. It has to be quite a dire situation. And so for him to make that decision was a really big decision in and of itself. And he came to the hospital for treatment.
So, we could dive into every detail and this and that, but it wasn't fun. It wasn't really helped by the Western medicine, but once I realized what my dream told me to do, I started bringing in lots of healing tools, which we'll get into how we use food for healing in future episodes. But the point of this story for this episode is that moose was a major warning sign for what was to come throughout that day. It's very interesting to look back and just see how clearly that happens for us. And so the story continues with the moose and how I was feeling over the next few days. I was getting better and better. And I think it was only 2 days later, I had a very vivid dream where a scraggly moose, a very sickly, scraggly moose, showed up at the house, and my friends were there and chased him away, and he left. And the symbolism of that dream was that the moose was losing its energy and that it was going away. And so that moose energy that showed up was leaving. And the next day after that dream, I was drastically better. And it was only a total of 7 days later from my little hospital visit that we were on an airplane going to California, and I was doing great. So a rapid turnaround, and again, it all coming on was signaled by the moose that was running with Sophia, and it all leaving was signaled by the weak moose that left in my dreams. This next story is kind of a heavy-hitting story that illustrates that when spirit animals show up for you, it's not always to go get the message out of the book. And so this story involves investments with cryptocurrency. And there was a time during a meditation where I was told to invest in 2 specific cryptocurrencies. And this was about a week and a half after putting money into those cryptocurrencies. We were woken up in the middle of the night to a bunch of banging on the deck, and our dog Rossi starts barking, and I knew immediately it was a bear. I just knew it. And so I said to Sophia, it's probably a bear. So I go out there and I look out the window, and there is a bear on the deck. So I'd say, Sophia, it's a bear. Get the camera. Let's get a picture of this. And she's going to get the camera. And in the meantime, the bear swipes at the front door, which had a doggy door in it, which was plastic, and just smashed that plastic doggy door to pieces. And I wasn't waiting for the camera anymore. I just banged on the front door really rapidly and loudly, and he ran away. And literally, this is how the next couple moments went. I banged, he ran away. I turned around 180 and immediately connected my eyesight to the microwave clock that said 333. And I was overwhelmed with this feeling of like it was Christmas morning. And we were up and we're like, holy crap, that was crazy. And then what I was doing at that time with my investments was checking them all the time because cryptocurrency changes rapidly. And so the next thing I did was just happen to check the prices of the cryptocurrency on an app that I have on my phone. And those 2 cryptocurrencies that I was told to invest in were sky high. They had just been put on a new cryptocurrency exchange, it's called, which caused the prices to just rapid fire straight up. And so the message of the bear here was, hey guys, this is your time. This is now. Because after, these coins are going to be bearish. And bearish in an investment market means things are going to go down in value. And so I'll be honest here and say at 3 a.m, we're like, oh crap, this is awesome. Let's cash out first thing in the morning. And so we went to bed, and when we woke up in the morning, the prices had come right back down to where they were. So we didn't lose any money, but we didn't make any money. And that's what the bear showed up to help us with, which is super cool to think about. I'm very excited that spirit and life and animals can work that way in our lives. And so next time we will not make that same mistake.
I want to give 2 more examples of how animals have shown up for us in the physical world and how they have delivered their message to us. The first one is, this was years ago. Brandon was bedridden and very ill, and it was serious times around here. And so one day we had a deer come up on the porch and was right in front of the glass. It was so cute because our new puppy at the time, Rossi, was nose to nose pretty much with this deer. And deer stands for tranquility and peace. So we knew that things would get better. This was a message from spirit. The deer have never been on the deck before or since then. The next one is, we were going to a backcountry hut trip which for those of you who don't know is a little cabin in the woods. And we were going in the wintertime on our snowmobiles. And we had maps out. We had never been there before, things pinned on the maps. And we were a little nervous going there for the first time and kind of questioning with the weather and everything, was this the right decision to be made? So on the way there, we had 2 bald eagles fly with us in our truck, and we took that as a really good omen, standing for freedom and soaring above and seeing things from a high perspective. We thought these animals were there to tell us we were on the right path going on this hut trip.
It was during a straightaway, and one was flying on the left side of our vehicle and one was flying on the right side. So we were like being held on both sides, and they flew with us for quite a ways.
Yeah, it was pretty incredible.
This next story is about a powerful animal message I got from a dream. It was a very vivid dream. And I'm realizing at this point in the episode that a lot of these stories center around my illness when I was sick. And I think it's just cool to realize how much support I get from the animal kingdom in these dire times. And so this was another one early on in my years of school at the Sophia Brandon School of Healing. And I had a teacher, or was about to have a teacher the next year, who I had already been introduced to. And she is a devotee of an avatar, as she refers to her, or a guru, a very prominent spiritual figure in India named Amma Karunamai.
She is said to be the incarnation of the Divine Mother.
My teacher recommended that I write to Amma and said that I may not hear back. She gets lots of messages every day, but that I will receive healing energy from her. So I wrote her an email, and she actually did respond to me. And she said that I need to get the holy ghee and that my teacher knows where to get it. And if I take 2 drops in each nostril after melting it on indirect heat each night before bed, that I will get better slowly. And my teacher helped me acquire some holy ghee that apparently comes from one of the most sacred herds of cows in the mountains of India. And I wasn't totally sure how much this would help me. It was more like people around me telling me it would help me, and me having my typical mistrust or distrust or hard to trust attitude that I guess I've had my whole life. And before I received the ghee in the mail, I received this really powerful dream. Like I said, it was very, very real, and it took place in this house that I live in. And what happened was, we have a big window that looks out into our backyard, and a bighorn sheep busted in through that window and immediately scared me. And I ran over to the kitchen and got as far away as I could, but I was still scared, and kind of moved around to the front door. And I went out the front door, and I went across the deck, and I went down the 2 stairs that we have. And the bighorn sheep followed me outside, and he walked to the top of those 2 stairs, and he stopped. And at that point, I realized he was harmless and wasn't here to harm me. And so I went over to him, and he bowed his head, and one of his big horns fell off into the palm of my hand. And in the dream, I said, "Wow, this is the hand I accepted the holy ghee with." And it was so random to have got such a powerful dream around that I was quite confident that there was something to this blessed holy ghee that I'd be receiving, and have been taking it diligently ever since, and have also been getting better ever since. The coyote story. This is the most dramatic one.
So this story starts off with, we had a classmate that was visiting, and she was staying with us. And at the same time, we were dog sitting for 2 dogs that we had never met before. They were new to us.
We met them, their parents, on a Facebook group looking for dog sitters, so we volunteered.
Yeah, they were really nice dogs. And so we decided to go for a walk in the forest. And being that these dogs were pretty well behaved and under voice control, everyone was off the leash. So the two dogs that we were dog sitting and our dog, Rossi. And so we start hiking up into the national forest around our house, and everything's going great, and we're really enjoying the views. Beautiful time of year. And then suddenly we hear this barking, and we're like, what is that?
Well, we knew it was Rossi, but there was also some yelling, and we were like, "What is that? What is going on?" And
Yeah.
it was off in a ditch off the side of the trail. We couldn't see; it was just we could hear it.
So the yiping and yelling continues, and suddenly Rossi comes running out of the woods with a coyote behind him. And we were all shocked.
And so I start yelling at everybody to get over here. Like, don't know these two dogs. Everyone's off a leash. Rossi listens really well, which is nice. And luckily, those two dogs did too, because that coyote must have been guarding some pups.
Yeah, it was springtime, so that's our best guess of why she was so aggressive, and she was aggressive.
She was just screaming and screaming and screaming, and she was charging at us. And so here's a little side story that I had a dream maybe a month before this where I was being attacked by two large cats, and I was telling them to get off me, and they wouldn't get off me. And something in the dream taught me that I needed to command from the level of my heart. So command from your heart. And I remembered that in this instant, and I just commanded from my heart for the coyote to back up. And it did, but it didn't give up. She was circling us and screaming and screaming and circling us, and she would charge us every minute or two and just try again. And I would just raise this big stick above my head and step forward and command it to leave, and she would run away a little frightened, but not far. And she was just circling us. We had about maybe a 3/4 of a mile walk back to the car, and she followed us all the way there, occasionally charging. And so I took an audio recording of her yelling once we were almost safely back to the car. And at this point in the audio, she's pretty far away from us, close enough to still record. But before I took this recording, she was not far. She was literally running laps around us, and we could see her the whole time.
Well, yeah, you decided to hit record when it was safe to hit record, because up until that point, it was like a dire situation. And good thing Brandon knew to command from his heart and also raise a stick above his head to appear bigger. That was the one thing that stopped her. Yelling didn't seem to do much, or coming at her didn't seem to do much, but the appearing bigger is what really worked.
And thank God those other two dogs listened. Like I said, Rossi listens, but he thought it was fun and games.
Yes.
He thought he made a new friend, and he was so happy, and he kept trying to run over to the coyote, and I kept telling him to stop, and he'd come back. But after that happened a few times, I had to get down on my knees, grab him by the face, and say, "Listen, stay here." And he did after that, but it was intense for us. So here's a recording that I took, and if you have any animals around, I'll just tell you right now, just skip this part or put headphones in, because I can't play it if there's any dogs around. They just immediately go wild. So that's just a little fair warning here, but here it is. This is the sound of the coyote stalking us after at least 5 minutes. Rossi uncovered him or her in their den, and we immediately turned around, and he's been stalking us since. Luckily, all the dogs are listening to us and staying in a pack. But this is pretty wild. We can see the car. We're almost back. And so we looked up the meaning of coyote when we got home, and nothing in our book resonated. So this is one of those times where we're trying to figure out what the message was using the resources that we have, and nothing in our book spoke to us. So we reached out to a friend who has a totally different book and with different messages, and her message just hit the nail on the head.
I'll read the message word for word. Your repetitive patterns in life are important to recognize so that you can prepare to emerge from the maze you've created. Walk the labyrinth and find the higher spiritual purpose for all of your challenges and lessons. As you discover which patterns no longer serve you, remove them and replace them with new patterns. Look for the emerging patterns of joy, harmony, and inner peace. Embrace them and continue forward in your evolutionary spiral upward.
So the reason that this was so mind-blowingly synchronistic for Sophia and I is because there had been a lot of discussion in this household between us in just the couple days preceding this event around using patterns as a wake-up call for things that need to be overcome and changed. And we had been talking about the patterns, it's see the patterns, and then here it is, and the message from the coyote, and it mentions the word patterns multiple times. And so to get this at the time was obvious to us and mind-blowing. And so that's how we were able to say, okay, well, our book didn't resonate, but clearly this one did.
And Robert Moss, who is an author, also speaks of repetitive patterns coming up, and he says, wow, watch out. Have I been here before? Does this seem familiar? What haven't I learned yet to move on from this pattern?
And I'll add that, yes, Robert Moss says that, but that's like a fundamental basic concept for spiritual growth, and many authors say that. It's just kind of a law of nature, I think, on the spiritual path.
So the message was delivered in a very profound way and really got our attention. And a lot of times that happens in life. We don't really get the message until something really shakes us or really catches our attention. And that's what this coyote did for us.
Or we get it, but we don't necessarily set the strong intention to listen to it, which I think is what happened in this case.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I just want to jump in here with one more thing to say. And this part of the recording is coming from a few days later after we recorded the rest of this episode. I'm talking to you from the editing room here. And I want to say that I planned my days out. And so I knew that today I would be editing this podcast. And a lot of editing this podcast was finding the coyote audio on my other devices and reformatting it and sending it over here and adding it to the coyote story. And so there was a lot of coyote energy. And this morning, my brother sent to the family group chat that we have that he had a coyote in his front yard in California today. And he sent a picture of it. And so I was just like, what are the odds that he has a coyote and sends me a coyote picture on the day that I'm editing the podcast with the coyote story and dealing with the coyote audio? And so there's all this coyote energy around me. And so in this podcast, we've talked about seeing seeing animals in dreams or in the physical. And this isn't totally one or the other. I guess you could say it's in the physical, but I didn't physically see a coyote. I just had the coyote energy in my awareness in a lot of synchronistic ways, as I just mentioned. So there's yet another way that you can get animal energy in your life.
So now it's time for our soulful send-off. In this episode, we've really highlighted how to heed the messages that animals bring, both in the dream world and in the waking world. And really how they appear in your life can be so profound and really help you in those moments of need.
Although sometimes interpreting them can be a little more confusing than, say, song lyrics might be, they are available to everybody, and it's another kind of effortless way to get guidance from your guides. And so I'm also realizing real quickly now that maybe one of the things that was highlighted in our very first episode, but not in this one, is that loved ones on the other side of the veil, loved ones who have passed over, can send you different animals, and that might be a message from a loved one as well. So look for animals, stay aware, be curious, and the more you pay attention to them, the more that they will show up for you. Thanks for being with us on this episode, and if you have any animal stories of your own, we'd love to hear them through a comment underneath this podcast. And you can look forward to our last one on the Methods of Divination subseries coming next.
Bye.
Bye.
Every week, we share our most recent divine guidance in an audio recording called Oracle Offerings. Sign up for only $5 a month at patreon.com/Aspen Roots.